it's the opposite of regeneration. Scaling and expanding large businesses is not regenerative. And you can describe it as it's a high risk, low return investment, which is the opposite that every investor wants. You want low risk, high return, right? Yes, it's going to be scary, I can tell, because it is. But I don't think we have time. We don't have time for people to waste their talent. And it's actually in that last part that I realized, because I was leading leaders, right? So you sort of are a step removed. And this is when I realized how much I went to defaults. What would you want to tell yourself now when you were in your first doubts of changing?
Hi everyone. Do me a quick favor and double check that you are a follower or subscriber wherever you listen to the show. I'd be deeply appreciative. It's the best way to ensure you never miss one of these unconversations. Plus, it's the simplest and easiest way to help us keep all the moving parts of our show going. You all are on this journey with us, and I want to personally thank you. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Unconversations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Alison, and today I am thrilled to welcome Dirk Van Onsem. He is the founder of Beyonders Collective. Dirk, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Alison, on the podcast.
Well, what's exciting is I am thrilled because I cannot wait to talk. You are located in Spain. So this is why I'm so grateful when I get to talk to global leaders like yourself, because I just feel you add a much different perspective. And I think it's so exciting when we get to learn from each other all around the world. So I know it's a little bit later your time, and so I am very grateful to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And yes, I love sharing and learning as well from others. So that's what I've done from your previous episodes as well. So. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, as I mentioned to you, I like to start out each podcast with a segment that I call the UNword Effect. And this is where I ask each of my guests to think of 3 words that have the prefix of un. And this is a good opportunity for us to learn about my speakers on what their leadership evolution's been about, how these words have evolved from them personally, professionally, or maybe a combination. And I am so appreciative for you, because I know when you and I first spoke, and rightfully so, that thinking of words with the prefix of on was like it was hard for you to sort of process and think about it. And I am so grateful that you stuck with me, because when you and I had our prep meeting together a couple of weeks back, I was like, wow, these words were just, they were so amazing for you. So if you could please first talk about your process and of how, just really, and please be open and honest about it. Like, what does she want me to do?
Exactly.
To talk to us about your process, and then we'll go into each one of those words individually. How does that sound?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah, you describe it as a process. Initially, I called it maybe suffering. Because, no, and it might also be with English not being my mother tongue, right? It could be linked to that.
Of course.
It was a bit of like tough in my mind, because you're trying to describe something about yourself, but in an unword. So it's sort of, this is what I'm not. Like that, my first sort of reflection was, so I need to look for a word that starts with un. But when I think about an unword, it's sort of normally describing what you're not, right? So that was a pretty sort of. So now I need to find a word that I think describe my leadership, and what's the unword link to that? So it was sort of the reverse way, I guess. And then on top of that, it's sort of already trying to identify, if you would ask me in a job interview, what are 3 words in the past, right? What are 3 words to describe yourself as a leader? I could answer I would have 3 words that are the ones you know you need to answer in an interview.
Yes.
But actually, by asking the unword, it's like, wait a minute, it's not that easy this time around. So it was quite of a interesting. Also because I guess they become a bit more personal in this way because you need to do more digging. And then there's also an element of, ooh, do you dare to say that about yourself? That's quite poshy that you think you're that, or that's quite, you're full of yourself, which is culturally where I'm from in Belgium, in France, is not the thing you often do. You don't often, speak highly about yourself. Someone else will do that if you work hard and if you do your job. So you'll get that. So there's also an element of that was playing around, I think, in this journey.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to kind of mention 2 points about that because I think that's so beautiful because you're right. Those words in certain cultures and even in our culture in the English language, those words could have some sort of negative. And so some of my guests have actually taken, for example, a word such as unworthy, which some of my guests have shared. And then they talk about how that unworthy became worthy and what that journey was, that they don't look at themselves anymore as unworthy, which is a very deep perspective for someone to share. And then I do also want us, as we're talking, because I thought it was really impactful when you said to me that in your culture, that to brag about yourself, because here in the States that doesn't seem to be a problem with people bragging about themselves, and especially from sometimes from a social media context. So I look forward to us kind of digging a little bit deeper into that, because I think that was really kind of impactful within your journey from leaving as an executive with Nike into starting your own company. So I look forward to us talking about that. So let's go with your first word, which was unassuming.
Yes. Yes, unassuming. For me, as a leader, like coaching is a big part of my way of leading, or has been a big element of my leadership style. And one of the main things you learn as a coach is that you shouldn't assume what the other person is thinking or saying. And actually, it almost comes back to how well do you listen, right? So for me, the bigger, the skill for a leader is to truly listen. And I guess in the beginning of my career, I thought it was needing to have the right answers was more important. And the more I grew as a leader, I realized actually having the right question is actually a much better skill set to have.
Yes.
And so this inquiry mindset, that if you want to hold that, you really have to be unassuming. Don't assume someone else has understood why you were here. Don't assume that what the person says at the first time, that is what you need to build on. Because if you go on the straight point, the first point they say, you might already miss just by pausing and say, is there something else we can also talk about, or is there something else linked to this? So I would say this holding back of judging quickly, of wanting to go fast to decisions. You have a certain objective in the meeting, and I assume everyone has now understood. Let's go. I really,
Right.
I really had to learn to be unassuming. So I guess it's one of my core, I would say, principles that I try to have or to do as when I'm leading teams or when I'm having conversations, whether it's before in corporate life or now in our startup here. It's actually the same in both cases.
Was there anything, Dirk, about you? I love how you translated that to your leadership style, because I do feel that we assume that everyone is kind of on our same page, and especially sometimes the higher up that you get into a corporation and more leadership responsibilities. Was there anything about you personally that you have found people to describe you as unassuming in a way? And where my question comes from with that is, I have a PhD and 2 masters, and the first response people would say, like, you don't look like you're a PhD. And I was like, well, what does that really, what does one look like?
Mm-hmm.
And they describe, meaning, I'm personable, I guess. I have a good sense of humor, they've described me as. And so when someone hears that I have that level of education, it's not a surprise that I couldn't get that level of education. It's for some reason the appearance or the look that it doesn't strike them that I would be maybe that far, that I'd be in that level of academia, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. I guess maybe as you described it, I'm obviously just thinking on the spot now. Like I guess because of my leadership style being more participatory, more asking questions, I was not, or I am not often seen as the one taking big decisions and talking like firmly, like this is the way we're going to do it. And so one of the things that I got as feedback at some points was, well, but are you then really the leader? Like, are you really do you have the leadership profile that's needed for big roles? And because I guess a bit of a I was going to say prototype, but the way that people look at leaders in the more traditional way, there's a certain way that mostly men, I think, behave in leadership positions with big statements, and they are the people taking decisions, and great storytellers, etc. Where my style was very different, and so I don't know. I think there was a question of, does he have authority? Like, do people not, because it looks like you always want to be kind, and as a result, are people maybe not really doing what you believe they're doing? So there was I think there's sometimes been an assumption like, is this leadership style effective?
Yeah, that's really fascinating, because the word as you were talking, Dirk, was authoritarian leadership style, where you'll take the input, but then it's this is how you make your point, and this is what we're gonna do. And you seem to have more of a participatory type of leadership, where you want to hear what everyone has to say, evaluate what everyone has to say, but then at the end of the day, it's your decision to drive whatever that point is.
Well, yeah, I guess how I would frame that last part is, at the end of the day, I would see it as my responsibility that the decision is taken and that we're executing it. But whether I took the decision or not I honestly was not really interested in. Very often it's because of the conversation that we lead that we end up at what we think. Okay, let's go with this. And in some cases, that of course had to mean that we had to go to a faster decision, and then I took a decision. It's not that I never took decisions, of course not. It's more a way of, I guess another point that came up in those, sometimes in this feedback, is it feels like you're going slow when you make decisions, because it's very participatory, right? And yeah, I always felt like, but the last person that hasn't spoken yet might actually move the conversation to a completely different way, right? So yeah,
absolutely.
So I guess that's what comes up, is like this style. And by the way, like in any leadership style, some people loved working with me, and I'm sure some people didn't, and probably many people didn't, because of, for some people it's like, but you never say clearly what you want from me. I'm like, no, because I would need you to figure that out, right?
Yeah,
but some
absolutely.
people really don't like that. They prefer to be said, do this in this way, right?
Yes.
So yeah,
yes.
that's I guess every leadership style has their pros and cons, right? And that's the same.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm so happy you went along with me on that question, because I think that, and especially with you holding an executive position at Nike, maybe that leadership style, and again, just assuming, maybe that leadership participatory worked in some cases, but, maybe the culture, was maybe demanding more of an authoritarian in order to get results. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I thought that was interesting. I just kind of wanted to see, because your leadership style, to me, of course, I didn't know you at Nike, but just getting to know you as we were collaborating on our episode together was right there collaborative. It was very participatory. We were, both sharing ideas and what we kind of were wanting to bring into the episode. So I could absolutely see that within your leadership style, as well as you internally as an individual. I love this next one, unlearning, and I got really excited about that one too. Please explain what unlearning meant for you as one of your unwords.
Yeah, it is actually that it's touching a little bit on partially what I said before, which is this idea that as a leader, things go a certain way, the company works in a certain way, so this is how you do meetings, this is how you do that, and you sort of, because I'm super grateful for the time I've had at Nike, because it's an immense school, in an amazing place to learn and to be in, and there is a certain way of doing things, right? That you see leaders around you do, and that you get in the leadership development programs, and so there's been a lot of framing and doing things that I just assumed was the way to do it. And then as you do more inner work, as you do more understanding, what do I stand for? How do I look at this type of situations? Then I realized very quickly that that I sort of defaulted in what I was taught to do, right? Rather than really asking myself the question, wait a minute, not because you've done it like this and you've seen people do it, that's how you should do it. So I catched myself very early on to always sort of, when someone said, we need to try to do this, or this is a challenge for you and your team, I already felt, okay, this is how we're going to do it. Before, it went very fast in terms of seeing the route in the way I wanted to get there. But that narrows down so much where you can end up, right? So it's this unlearning of, actually, I'm used to doing this way. I'm going to very explicitly choose to not do it this way. So how can I do this now in a different way? So this unlearning of your default reactions, behaviors, allow again for way more, places to end up at.
Sure.
It's less prescriptive.
Let me ask you this. I'm sorry, please repeat that again.
It's less prescriptive as a result, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, was this unlearning beginning awareness? How long were you at Nike where this sort of internal process kind of learning began for you?
No, there was more in the later part of my career at Nike. When I because I went through the organization. Of course, like most people, starting as an individual contributor. All the way in the beginning of my career. Then you learn how to lead a team, if you have the chance to do that. And then from there, leading a larger organization in different countries, and then a whole department, and then a business, so you grow through. And it's actually at that later stage, as I started to lead larger organizations and change, or most of my work was then helping the organization or the team move through the changes that we as a company were doing, because that's something that Nike does quite often.
Yeah.
And it's actually in that last part that I realized, because I was leading leaders, right? So you sort of are a step removed. And this is when I realized how much I went to defaults, and how much I could say, actually, rather than already knowing how we're going to do it, let's just step back and understand, what if we don't do our default reaction? What's the, what could there be an alternative way of doing it? So it was much more, once I had, you can say, the luxury or the responsibility to be a step further from, let's say, the day-to-day organization, or from the day-to-day work. It was a little bit more of an organizational view that I had then.
Oh wow! No, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that gives some context around your career,
Mm.
and you were there how long?
25 years. Yeah, very long,
Yes.
very long period.
Yeah.
Almost straight out of university, and I have to say it was an amazing journey, and I was really I'm a sport passionate. Like I loved to do a lot of sports. I wasn't great in any of them, so then I ended up coaching. I was okay at them, a lot of sports,
Yeah.
but not really really great. And then I went into coaching very early on. Um, and so this was a perfect match because and I was a teacher in physical education. That's my I graduated with that. And so this combination of sports, but explaining to store staff how our products worked was such a thrill, in terms of where that started. But from there, it went relatively quickly into leadership positions, and then the whole coaching that I took from sports was translated into coaching teams and leaders. And yeah, that's been really I guess my drive through my career. I had amazing opportunities to live in different countries and to have different sizes of organizations and businesses. And the core of what I was doing was really coaching my direct team in a way that they could be their best self to lead their teams, right? So I always had this lens of being really, I would say, people centered rather than business centered, right?
Yes.
And I did sales roles with large revenue responsibilities. So I was okay doing that, but I guess where my passion was and where I made the bigger difference versus maybe some others was much more on that leading team part than on anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that goes into a perfect transition to your unknowing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't I would love for you to go into what the unknowing means to you. And I think that could also be a really great transition because you told me a story, and I'd love for you to share that because I think that's really how Beyonders Collective came about. And I have had other guests on this show. And I will tell you, I do not have any children, but when you told me your story, and when I've had other guests tell me, and then there's this moment as an adult where you're like, I need and I want to do better. So when you're hearing it from a child's mouth, and your story was almost pretty heartfelt as some of the other ones. So please, let's talk about Unknowing, and then I would love for you kind of to talk about your transition, which I think would be great with your daughter's story, and your transition out of Nike to what you're doing today.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I guess the unknowing word is definitely related to that transition. So I'll actually explain the transition first, and then explain unknowing because it definitely came from that. So about 5 years ago now, my daughter at the time, was 14 at the time. She was really afraid and had fear about climate change. So she had seen the first movies about climate change. For her, the first movies, and this you could call it eco anxiety or fear for what happens through climate and through climate change. And as she was sort of wrestling with that, she started to write about that, and she actually wrote a small story, If Nature Had a Voice, which was her way of trying to understand why don't adults do more if we know that this is happening. Why is no one concerned about this? Why is no one doing something about this, right? And as she was writing that story and researching that, she asked me at the dinner table, like, what do you do in Nike to stop climate change? And I personally was not doing anything about that in the company. I was in sales and marketing and basically trying to grow the business of Nike. And so I had to admit to her that I was not doing anything. And that just was very shame. I felt ashamed, to say to your daughter who's fearful, like, well, I'm, not really doing anything. And I realized I can't have to say this again. I cannot repeat this again in, let's say, 10 years when she asks me again. Or who knows if she would have children or my son would have children, that they would ask me, hey, you knew about this. And by the way, Laura, which is the name of my daughter, wrote this book and still you haven't done anything. So that sort of was the starting point of my transition. And it still took me 4 years or 4 or 5 years to really step into this unknowing, right? Because this is where this word comes from. Because leaving the corporate life and with all its securities and the paycheck and the organization that I knew for so many years, and I was really leading out of expertise. I was by then I knew the marketplace, I knew how Nike worked, and I could really again, I didn't realize at the time, but a lot of my leading was actually based on knowing the place that well and knowing how things are done, right? And so that made me go on a search for how can I actually contribute into this world. And I went on a sabbatical I'll spare you the burnout depression phase and the difficulties in between that, but there was of course this questioning moment, right? There was this idea of, well, if this is what I want to get to. Initially my idea was to do that in Nike, but of course my experience in Nike was not in that field of sustainability. For Nike to just put me from there to there was not that simple and was not something that was on the card. So I was like, if my own company doesn't see that, then how the hell am I going to do something more meaningful, right? And so that coincided with some other personal challenges. So really went to a hard time.
So Dirk, can I ask you this question? When at this time, is this when you took a sabbatical from Nike, so you were able to kind of figure out what the transition out of Nike could look like, as well as how you could start this company?
Yes,
is that where that
correct. So,
and was it through that journey of yours, and of course not to get too personal, is that where, when you and I were discussing where some of that anxiety and depression, and is that sort of where the more you were exploring, was that, and you start really kind of pulling the layers back from yourself, is that where some of that began to evolve?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the starting point was more like I would say a self-pity almost, of like, oh, my company doesn't see that, and which was, of course, I mean, I understand now why the company didn't do that or wasn't seeing that as an option. So it was very much from there looking at, okay, if it's not this that I know, where am I going to go to next? That was for me very fearful, and so as you start to question, why is that the case? Why am I so insecure about this? Right? Then your self-critic starts to become bigger and bigger. It's like, you don't even dare to leave a company. Like, so many people do it, and why don't you dare to do it? You're too money focused. You're too status focused. So all these, your inner critic just has a proper go at you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so happy you're sharing that, because I've gone through that myself. And I think that's really important, because I think that's part of what scares people from, starting a company, even though you could have the best intentions and you can see it so clearly and so perfectly and you can see this passion and dream in front of you, and then what I kind of call them the record player, that kind of starts in your mind, and I think that's really important for us to be vulnerable and have these conversations, because as you said, we all go through that. So I appreciate you sharing and allowing me to kind of bring you back to that place, just because we go through it in our own way, and it can paralyze you, those record players, and they had me. I share about kind of some trauma that I went through, and it took 10 years for me to finally faced that, which has allowed me to rebrand my company the way that I've done, allowed me to do this podcast that I never thought in 100 years I would do. So, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that personal side, Dirk.
Yeah,
I
no,
really
exactly.
appreciate that.
And it's actually, and I've been really blessed by having amazing people by my side during that period, in the sense of I have a coach that I've worked with for many years, and she's much more friend now, that even though she's still, advising and guiding me. And also when I went on that sabbatical, I went to Brazil to a biohub in Sinal do Vale in Brazil. And the lady that's actually running that place is a remarkable lady, Thais, who is an extraordinary life journey, but who is very wise, and I would say was the perfect host for me, even though I didn't realize when I went there in the beginning, because I thought I was going to be in the gardens and just to be back in nature and to find time for myself and just, I guess be in contemplation a little bit, to see like what do I then want next in life. And she was remarkable in making me realize actually you have a skill set, even from your company, that thanks to Nike you've learned so many things. Now go and apply it in places that need this skill set, like their place. So I was there for a month, and we worked together in looking at their processes, at the way the team worked, at the way they made decisions, at their strategy. Basically the same things I would do in Nike, but then applied it in an NGO. Who didn't have someone that was having been trained for 25 years in a corporate like this. I mean, they have amazing skill set. I didn't have to bring anything new, but just my organizing skills or my questioning and the coaching and the strategy really helped that place. And in return, every conversation during the day and in the evening, it was also about what are you learning here, which is why she's so unique in what she does. Because yes, I went to help them, but I know for sure I got more out of my experience there than they got out of me, And this is where I realized, okay, this is something I can do. I can help places like Sinal do Vale with this skill set to become self-sustaining, because a lot of nature regeneration projects don't have the financial possibilities, and they're dependent on funding constantly. They don't have business models that make them sustainable. And so that's how we thought about Beyond Us Foundation, Beyond Us Collective. Can we be an advisory, strategic advisory sort of, that helps these places to streamline their story, to optimize their business models, and to make them self-sustaining. And very early on we realized, well, that's just advisory, that's consultancy, and there's nothing wrong with consultancy, but in this world, it's much, much more important that we learn to do this ourselves in a place-based project. So we can actually help creating these spaces where we learn how to do that. So this is why we started here in Mallorca, this biohub with Beyond Us Collective, and it's a place where we would like to be a place where people can come and help build new systems, help build new ways of doing planet positive things, of regeneration. There's amazing people here that have more than 15 years experience, done amazing projects here that deserve a platform where their work is shown. So that's one of the things we're trying to do here. So coming back to the unknowing, because I know there was a very long answer.
No, not at all.
What I really realized here in this work, it is we don't know. We don't know what the future is. We don't know what the right way of collaborating is. We don't know what the new financial system will look like. What's clear is that the current one isn't really helping, right? So with this project, coming out of 25 years where you basically knew how the next year would look like, with the quarters, with this meeting there, and then now into literally waking up every day. Sometimes it's the water that's broken down. Sometimes it's all of a sudden 3 people walk in and say, hey, we would like to, be part of this. So there's an unknowing part of excitement, knowing,
yes,
and just playing with what's here, but also very consciously always doing things from the place of we need to try things because we don't know. Whoever says now that they know how it's going to be, I think just doesn't understand where we are, right? So it's very consciously saying like we're experimenting, not from a place that we know we think this is right, but it's better to try this than to do nothing, right? So that's sort of
Totally.
why unknowing feels like the right word. Also about that transition, because I had no idea when I left Nike that this was going to be the manifestation. I had no idea. We might talk a year from now, it might be something very different, right? And to step into that place of not knowing and to find the way to stay calm in that, all your shadows show up, all your fears come up, all your like, "Ah," and okay, just keep breathing, right? That's the only thing in the end that you can do is keep breathing and see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Dirk. When did you, because you're definitely transitioning to an area that I certainly wanted to ask you about, because entrepreneurship is, I mean, as glorious as it sounds, it is it's a lot of hard work, and it doesn't sleep. It's a 24-hour, especially in your brain, as it is mine, I'm sure. When did you take the leap, or did you, I should probably ask, where you said, okay, I've officially closed my chapter at Nike and I'm now jumping into the pool with my whole body. What was that experience like for you? Because I think sometimes when people are wanting to make this leap, and I think this will be so powerful for even people who are wanting to leave corporate and they're a CEO and they've always wanted to start their own business. You know, there's always keeping this, toe in the water because of the stability, and there's no shame in that. None at all. But when did you, and what was that experience like for you to go, okay, I am going to close this chapter, and I'm all in, and this is what I am going to focus on and build?
Yeah, I think the experience, it was a long journey, as I mentioned, right? So the beginning is probably 4 or 5 years ago. I left Nike now a year and 2 months ago. So it's pretty recent still, right? How the journey was, I guess one part was I ran out of excuses. There was an element of I couldn't deny anymore that I knew I had to do something, or that I wanted to do something in sustainability or in regeneration, right? Because I always think, like, when people say, I don't like where I am, it's like, yeah, but I don't know what else to do. Do I have the skill set? Do I have the financial possibility to do it? So there's a lot of reasons that people, it's not making up, they're real reasons that they come up on why you decide to stay in the safe place, right? And I guess on these questions, my answers were always pretty clear. I didn't have an excuse anymore. So the only thing was daring. In the end, it was just a matter of, do you dare to do it, right? And so I guess the process of how that happened was, I had a foundation already before, and in that foundation I tried different things. I tried different elements that I could later maybe come and couldn't see that they could become my business, basically, right? But then so that was sort of, I was thinking I was very smart, that I'm going to try some things and then I will see that this is so certain, then I will jump over. Of course that didn't happen, right? Of course that didn't happen. But that was a first attempt, right? But in the end, it was really the depression or burnout, whatever you want to call it, that made me realize I can't continue what I'm doing. I'm so not living my purpose, or that this environment is not anymore what feeds me. Plus, I can answer all these questions. Like, I know what I want, what I could do. I know how to do it, and I had the luxury that I did not have to earn money the next month. I had savings, or I have savings that I can have a year or maybe even 2 years without direct income. And that is, of course, a massive privilege, right? And so the moment I realized that, I'm like, okay, if now you're not doing this, then you have to stop saying that you want to do something like this, right? So it was very much that, and it still was super scary, Like we're
Of
not gonna. I
course.
mean, and it still is scary now. Now we're like a year and 2 months in. No income. Raising money for the project, but everything of that money goes to the project because otherwise we cannot continue. So yeah, I guess it was a journey of first trying to find all the answers, but then in the end, it's still a moment of really saying, I'm stepping out. Um,
Yes.
and the way that maybe one last thing to add to that was to really reflect on what you're grateful for of that past chapter and to deeply understand that I felt I had learned what I could learn. For me to keep growing as a person, I had to take myself out of that environment. And so to really very deeply be grateful for all the people I met, for all the experiences I got, for all the privilege I had, and to actually create this situation in which I could afford to try this, right?
Yes.
That really helped me because I could really see that I could be very grateful. I also felt I had contributed to the company. And so I could, ending this well was very important, because I was maybe too focused on how do I start anew. But you also have to close off the previous chapter, right? And so
Right.
really focusing on
Right.
what does it feel like and what else yes, I could have done more jobs in Nike, but they wouldn't have really developed me in the way that I was yearning to develop, right? And then it's accepting that and then realizing what's the worst that can happen. The worst that can
Right.
happen is I have this time frame of almost 2 years that I could say like I'll get around, and yes, of course I'll use savings, which is not ideal, but that's what's happening. Um, the worst that can happen is that after those 2 years I need to try find another job in what I
Right.
was doing before, and probably at a lower level, doesn't matter. But it's not that I will not be able to find a job. I have the luck and the privilege that I will be able to find something. Maybe not my
Yes.
dream, but
Yes.
something. So this
Yes.
idea like, oh, financially I'm going to be in trouble, that's not really true in the world, in
Right.
the
Right.
part of the world that we live in or that I live in. Other people, I never judge someone who says I can't do this because I need to financially. I'm not in this position. Um,
Absolutely.
or there's no jobs available for what they have learned, etc. Then it's very different. But if I am not too picky, I can get a job. I can get a job somewhere in a team, helping others, or work in a store. Of course I can get a job. So this idea of financial is going to be it was just another reason to not do it, another excuse.
When you officially said, "Hey, I'm going to close this
Mm-hmm.
chapter," one before I ask you that question, can you talk about your shadow sides? I
Mm-hmm.
thought that was so interesting when you talked about that. And does that sort of also go along with? Did you find your shadow sides, which I'll have you explain, and then you touched on imposter
Mm-hmm.
syndrome when we spoke
Yes.
before. Did those sort of calm down a bit for you? Those thoughts when you finally said, "Hey, I'm now gonna focus
Mm.
solely. I'm gonna close this beautiful chapter of Nike, and I'm now going to jump all into Beyonders Collective."
No, I would say the opposite happened. Rather than them
Really?
going down, I think they really surfaced again, right?
Okay.
Um, and yeah, I mean, the shadow side is when you're basically, at least the way I look at that is it's the parts of yourself that you don't really acknowledge that are there. They're there, but sort of when you present yourself to someone who you talk, you do your best to hide them, right?
Yes.
But when you take away the certainties that I had in this case, job wise, and you come in this Beyond Us collective where we're three co-founders, right? And I would say, I pride myself. I'm a great collaborator. I'm this leader that has worked in, complex organizations, da, 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 da. And then you see that when you're with 3 co-founders trying to figure out how you're going to pay the bill next month for whatever we need to do, all of a sudden my scarcity mindset, like I can say, oh, it's abundance, we're doing this because we want to showcase that life is full of possibilities. And that's, of course, the story that I truly believe as well. But the moment you step out of all of these uncertainties and you get really to the challenging conversations, my scarcity mindset pops up straight away, like, oh, we need to financially, and from the 3, I'm the one with most business background. So I end up having the sort of the role within the team to more look at our financials, etc., and cash flow. And then I become this sort of, I don't know, I don't like to admit it, right? But it's sort of like this, oh, we need to be careful with this, and oh, we can't spend this, and like, oh, because we're not going to make it to the next month. So this, but it creates an energy in the team that's not helpful when you're in a startup. Of course, we don't need to be like doing crazy expenses, but so it's just one example. This, or the fear of failure, this, which connects to the imposter syndrome that you spoke about. Like the way that's manifesting itself the most now is like, yes, I have certain experience and background, but not at all in this field. Like in the field that I'm going into, which is regenerative, and there's amazing projects, farmers that know so much about this I don't call it economy or bioeconomy of this, and I am a beginner in this. Like I'm literally like with this beginner's mindset, sort of going like, okay, and at the same time, I feel I can contribute with facilitation or with leadership or with questioning again, right? With organizational skills. But there's this like, who am I to, like, we're coming to Mallorca with 3 people that are not from Mallorca to this place because we want to become part of this regenerative community. But how do you do that without stepping on people's toes that they think that what you're talking, or what they should do differently? I mean, I don't.
Yes.
I know processes on how to get the best out of everyone, and that I think I can apply here.
Yes.
But who am I to tell you that you should do this differently? So this imposter syndrome is especially coming up when you change industry. Because
I bet. Because you knew Nike so well for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
You knew the clientele, you knew the products, you knew
the market,
areas that you were doing business, you knew the culture of it.
Yeah.
So you knew how to maneuver yourself in those different situations, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
For our listeners and viewers, please talk to me about what Beyonders Collective does, where you're hoping to build the company. And then I'd love for us to talk, because you're also in, did you say first or second round funding?
We are finishing our first pre-seed round of funding, yes.
Amazing. I would love for you to also get into that conversation, because I think it's really important, especially as you were saying, you're wanting people to believe in your company and what it can achieve, and you're asking for money in order to do that. And so I would love for people to kind of get an idea of what that is like from your perspective, especially when you're talking about regenerative and farmers and that, because when you're asking for money, you're also having to talk about return and what that's going to look like. And then, as you said, you're coming from a place of the unknowing, and how do you sell certain unknowing, and asking for money as well. So I know that was my long question around that.
Well, I'll start with what we are doing, and as obviously we're starting here, right? So the reason for being, let's say, or what we're trying to do, is to build resilient communities. So we believe that our thesis is we're going to go through a lot of change and transition, not just as humanity, but in general. And one of the things that is happening at the moment is that we're, as a society, very dependent on very few people, like a very central group of people hold the power, hold the financial power. We know all the stats, right? And as there's going to be more and more disruption, we need local communities, we believe, to be resilient, to be able to help each other, and to be able to, if systems would collapse, how do you still collaborate? How do you work together? How do you show that there's another thing possible, right? And so our attempt with Beyond Us Collective is to show that there is other ways possible. There is other ways of collaborating. There's other ways of doing business. There's other ways of contributing to a positive planet rather than be extractive. Most companies, of course, currently are extractive.
Could you give a simplistic, as much as you could, an example of what that could actually mean and look like for people to understand from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think if you look today, one of the areas we're looking in is biochar, is the process of recycling wood wastes into called biochar. I mean, so basically what you do is you look at clippings of wood, etc., that would normally just people would leave on the ground, or worse, in Mallorca, people would burn it, and then that has a lot of CO2 in the air and can create lung disease, etc. But biochar as a process is a recycling of this wood waste in a pyrolysis machine. You asked me a simplistic example. It's not so simple, but it's
Yeah,
but it's basically,
but relatable is great.
yes. So it's
This is
basically saying
perfect. Yeah,
you're going to
thank you.
recycle wood waste into biochar, which actually captures the CO2 and can be used in soil and makes the soil richer again. It keeps the water, it keeps nutrients better. So it's actually a recycling, creating a compost product that's actually going to create healthier soils and going to make the crops better and basically let things grow better again. So that's one example where we say, actually, today it's waste. How can you upcycle that waste, right, into a regenerative business? That, because the more we do that, the better the soil becomes, the more positive impact on the climate there will be. And what we're starting to think about is, okay, that's just one business, but how could other businesses related to wood collaborate? Because the waste that is needed for, or that is maybe coming from a carpenter, can be used for biochar, and they're now not co-locating. So how could you co-locate things? So it's really thinking through in a systemic way, how can businesses benefit from each other, but in a way that the more successful they are, the better the planet is, or the better the earth is. That's sort of an example of a regenerative business.
And being also able to possibly provide healthier foods as well.
Correct.
Right?
And
so here, so where you're able to grow foods too without, a pesticide.
That's indeed the plan. Yes, these indeed sort of replace, pesticides, right? And so this is just one idea, or one business idea, but the other part of this is also to bring people together that are experimenting with this, so they learn from each other. So it's sort of an incubator style proposition, where you bring people together that want to solve these problems and that have these local examples, and how can we benefit from co-locating and from doing things together. That's sort of the essence of what we're trying to do.
I love it. And we have a very dear mutual friend that connected us and said you were doing some really incredible and unconventional work, and you are, which is just amazing. How did you come up with Collective Beyonders, knowing that there's, because usually when you're starting a business, right, you find a gap. And so you see these people that are trying to do good work and sustainable work.
Yeah.
But how did you figure out, with your team, of course, figure out that there was a gap to be filled in order to bring these people together? That's kind of my first question.
Yeah.
And then my second question would sort of be around, okay, are you testing things out now in order to where when you're seeking funding, to be able to explain that, have there been tests that you've done,
Mhm.
as kind of an example that you just brought up, where you're able to show, because usually in sometimes when trying to seek funding, they it not a lot of just ideas are necessarily funded,
Yeah, yeah,
but you're having to sort of show statistically where you're hoping to go, and why your idea is so valuable. When you're dealing with the planet, it's very valuable to me right off the bat.
yeah,
So,
yeah. And it is challenging, of course, because as we all know, at the
yes,
moment, nature is not really valued in our current financial system,
no,
right? So
yes,
yeah,
correct.
to answer your first question, how did we see the gap? It's really through this experience in Brazil, like this biohub in Brazil, um, which has already been going on for 50 years, and a UN flagship biohub, Sinal do Valle, um, that has that is there showing what can happen if you truly bring the local community together, work on truly regeneration, not only of the land but of the social structure, of the way people collaborate. So we understood what a biohub could do in a region because we had seen the incredible work of Thais, and then from her place we got to know other ones, and we got to learn of that. Now, why do we think it's useful to do it here, and why this is a gap here? More from this, I would say, experimenting phase and this bringing people together is because the island of Mallorca is very well situated within Europe, so it's easy accessible for people to come and learn and etc. But also an island is typically, a great. You have the boundaries of the island, which make it a really good place to try things out. And again, we're not the first ones doing that here. I mean, there's an amazing, group of scientists. Daniel Wall is one of the, what to name one, is a very recognized scientist, and doing this regenerative work. And so we knew there was already there's people doing great things here, so we could become part of that. Not
I
that
see.
again, this is the unknowing part or the imposter syndrome. They have all the knowledge. We don't believe that we can learn them anything on regeneration, and we think we can be a place where they can get a platform to do their best work, and to elevate
I
their best
see.
work and to learn from others, right? So it's very much an understanding that we believe in the principle that a biohub can really catalyze a region and create a bioeconomy. That's sort of the theory of change. And there is a long history on the island of people doing this that deserve actually the platform that we can hopefully offer them.
That's beautiful.
That's the way
That's
it.
beautiful. How has it been, for you, going through funding? Because I will tell you, there's a lot of, and I'm not sure what that process is
Mm-hmm.
in Spain, for example, as the process here in the States. But I'm sure it's just as challenging and nerve wracking and time consuming as well. What has that been, like, for you and your team?
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely not been easy. That's for sure. And so we have different stages, like every startup, right? So we are closing now this pre-seed fund raising, right? Which is really family, friends, and impact investors that deeply understand what we're trying to do, and because what we're trying to do is relatively new. Again,
Mm-hmm.
not pretending that we have doing something that no one else is doing, but it is not an established proposition that an investor knows. Oh, I know that brings me a 10% return or something, right? So this is very new
Sure.
territory. So as a result, it's been a lot about talking to people that understand that we need to try new things. And so we have basically raise this pre-seed through a bullet loan principle. So it's not a donation, it's not philanthropy. We are, there's a return that we promise to the investors, and it is not a high return. So they could earn more if they put that money somewhere else, for sure, right? And it is with a 5-year time frame, which gives us the time to actually develop the business so that we can actually have some security, right, in our operation. And so it's really about talking to and bringing people here, showing them what we're up to, showing them the place, explaining the deep sort of inquiry that we're doing, that we need a solution that's different. And I think that's what convinced most. I mean, in a pre-seed, really what people do is they invest in the people more than in the idea, because it's so early.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's what I was going to say. Yes.
Yeah. So of course
and,
it is.
And that's fortunate. That's very fortunate in that situation, because I think in your type business, I mean, you really do need someone to be passionate about what it is you're trying to do.
Yep.
And anything pertaining to sustainability or climate can take a period of time. And so you do need the investors to really have a passion, first of all, for what it is you're wanting to do for the planet. And two, understanding that, yes, they're not going to get rich, like that.
No,
and
exactly.
So it has to be a very collaborative
yes.
purpose together, right?
Exactly. And you can describe it as it's a high risk, low return investment, which is the opposite that every investor wants. They want low risk, high return, right? So, right. But you have to be transparent about that. It is, this is not the type of project or investment that has the same sort of mechanisms than what I would say is the current financial system is used to, right? It's not about, and then we're going to scale this and then it's going to become a multi-billion-dollar business. No, it's not. Right. No, this is a place. And if we can prove that these places are self-sustaining, we could have many of them around the world, places like this, not by the same funder, because it's too complex to start it everywhere. But it is an approach that hopefully shows that when we collaborate, there's different governance systems that we're using, and we're using blockchain, and these are new technology, so all of that is part. So it's still a interesting tech innovative project, but it is not a high return one. So the investors need to realize that this is creating a new model.
Yes.
And it's worth experimenting with new models.
Yes.
Right? And we discovered that very early in our conversations, because initially we were really positioning ourselves as a biochar business, because that was the initial proposition. And because that's a recycling business. So you can really apply the old metrics to a business. Right? So, okay, what's your revenue going to be? What's your OPEX? What's your CAPEX? And how are these evolving over years? And how can you scale later so we can see that you can get a big return on my investment? And then we realized that it's the opposite of regeneration. Scaling and expanding large businesses is not regenerative. The planet is finite in terms of resources. Every place is finite. If we would set up here a very large biochar business, it would mean we would have to ship our products. So we would use again more CO2 than we're sequestering. That's wow. Why would you even do that? Just to have a higher revenue? But then you're not following the purpose of your business. So it's through that realization that we saw these initial investors, which we approached them like venture capitalist type investors, and they immediately said, but you're not a business for us to invest in, right? And so then we had to shift to family, friends, impact investors.
Yes.
And now we're in the second phase. We're going to, try a more, new way of raising money for land and acknowledging land and making sure the land can own itself at the end, the land trusts. So we're trying to be innovative in the fundraising way. And but not from a, and this is high return. No, this is the way it should be, really.
Yes.
That's sort of
Yes. Yes. I have to tell you, when I was hearing you talk about that it's low return and high risk, just being able to say that transparently. Well, now that we can move on from that, now let's talk.
exactly.
It almost takes some of that pressure off. Like, okay, now that I got that out on the table, now I can tell you what I what I want to do.
Well, and yeah, and it also opens a question to an investor, like.
Yes.
Because what people don't calculate in any of their investments is the potential loss if we don't try this, right?
Exactly.
If we don't find a way to use less pesticides, if we don't find a way to make regenerative local projects successful again, rather than only big supermarkets, for example, that centralize again the money to eventually, right? The cost of not having resilient communities, you cannot really quantify in a return, right? So it's when you explain to someone, when they look at you initially, go like, what do you mean, high risk, low return? Well, because if you want to just feed in the current old system, there's plenty of vehicles, there's plenty of tech startups, there's plenty of whatever. Go, knock yourself out, right? That's there. It's high risk, but high return, right? This is high risk because, we don't know if this is going to work. But what you know is you're feeding into an ecosystem where many, many, many people are trying to show a new reality. So it is, we want people that invest here to feel part of the project, because it is amazing to see young entrepreneurs that are going to help set up a moringa business here, because we have moringa trees here, and it's this young entrepreneur that is just, her eyes lit up completely when she talks about what moringa means to her from her family, because
Yes.
and that is such a healthy product that actually should be used way more. So when we can make this a successful business, more people will benefit from the benefits of the plant. When you see things like that, you know why you're investing here. And then it's not about did I get 5 or 7% return or 10 or 12. It's I've actually helped build something new that is going to have a bigger impact on many people.
I think that's so brilliant, Dirk, because I what just really impacted me with what you just said was what happens if we don't do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really great questions for entrepreneurs who are wanting to go through and seek investment money. Is yes, focusing on the return, of course, is important in anything, or what that return is going to look like. But I think focusing in your sales pitch is really about what happens if we don't do this. And right there, I think is so impactful. And I think I love that switch that you just said, because you can talk about the scaling, you can talk about all those things, but again, I don't think people, when they're talking about the passion of their business, what happens if we don't do this? If I can't get this out there? And that is where I think that could be almost someone's perfect sales pitch.
Yeah.
When they're seeking seed money or first round, second round, however the process looks like. We are getting very close to time. Thank you for letting me go over a bit with you. I wanted to give you just an opportunity just to, if there's any last thoughts you may have, any bit of a nugget that you would like to share. And then we can go into, I think you may have a question to ask me as well. But I want to just give you this moment. There's just sort of a last nugget that you would like to share. I would like to give that to you.
Well, maybe last nugget is the reflection on this transition, and again, this Thais in Brazil made me realize why I really had to take the jump. Because I know you asked me, what was it like to take it, and her, I guess, statement to me was, in the place we're in at the moment as the world, we don't have time for people with skills like you to not put them in the benefit of the planet, right? And so I guess my nugget is, for anyone listening, is if you're doubting to do the thing you really, really know you really would love to do, but you're fearful of doing it, maybe that nugget helps, in terms of we don't have time for us to waste our talents for things that you're not really passionate for, and that's not in the benefit of more than yourself. Seriously, we
Yeah.
don't have the time. And so I guess this nugget is encouraging people to say our time is now to do something. It's not like
Yes.
in 20 years, like, oh, we should have. This is the moment where if you feel you're not aligned with what you're doing, because this is not judgment to people working in corporates, because I've done it myself
No,
and I love it. So
absolutely.
this is not
Yeah.
judgment. But if you're sitting on this yearning of wanting to do something different, yes, it's going to be scary. I can tell because it is. Um, but I don't think we have time. We don't have time to
No.
for people to waste their talent and then not be in in something that's really fulfilling them, and as a result helping others. I know that's maybe an end nugget. But I love
No,
it.
I think
Now I
it's
ask you a question. No, now it's
yes. I'm
your
I'm
first
I'm ready.
table.
Please.
Yeah. Well, going into the same theme of imposter syndrome transition, if you look back on your transition, what would you want to tell yourself now when you were in your first doubts of changing? So when you knew you would have to change, and now you are where you are, and if you now could go and give yourself some advice, what would it be?
Yeah, I love that question. I was asked this question on a podcast that I was on earlier. And I have found most of my life, I have done things based upon what people expected me to
Mm.
do or to be. And that's what it was. It started with with schooling. I went to college. I was very grateful for college. I got two master's degrees and a PhD. Um, and I don't know if I was doing those for me or if I was doing
Mm.
those to get uh, the attention um, uh, of I would say my family.
Mm.
Kind of like look at me, not from a boasting standpoint, but will you be proud of me if
Yes.
I did this, or were you proud of me if I go ahead and do that? And so I felt constantly I was always chasing that. And I'm very grateful. I went through the education. I learned a lot. I can have people call me Dr. Alison Schmidt, which is wonderful. But yeah, I think for me, what happened, COVID hit and was a terrible time for everybody, horrible time. I was doing work that I enjoyed. I had another company that was called ALS Group that I had for over 20 years. And for me, as scary as it was, because my company lost contracts like that, we had no idea when things were going to, start back up again. But I went through my own executive coaching and my own therapy, and
Mhm.
I was like, hey, if I'm going to start something new and different, and what would that be and what would that look like? And I never thought in a million years I would start a podcast ever. I had no idea what that would look like, who would come on the who would come on the show when I never even had anything. So I think for me, I wish I told myself a while ago, really focus on me, and I didn't understood what that word passion or purpose really meant.
Mhm.
I do now. And I'm happy I learned what that means later on in life for myself. But I don't think if and I would go along too, Dirk, where you said not to be afraid,
Mhm.
because I think for me I've always lived in a fear place. Like, what happens if this wasn't good enough? What happens if people didn't like this, or whatever? And I look back and I actually have had a really great career. I've lived in fear because I've always been an entrepreneur. So I don't know why that would still
Mm.
frighten me. But I do have to say, going through my similar journey and taking a leap into something such as, podcasting, because people are used to seeing me in a very different light. I work with very big corporations. I do executive coaching work. I work on big mergers and acquisition projects. Part of my transition from my previous company to rebranding is really focusing and working with people. Mm-hmm. And I really missed that. It was a lot of systems driven, a lot of revenue driven, and those are important things. Don't get me wrong, but I really missed helping people become excellent and being the kind of people they can really be and doing great work. And that's what sort of kind of gave me the idea in doing this podcast, is featuring unconventionally excellent people from around the world. And that's why I was very excited to have you on the show to really demonstrate that. And so, yeah, that was really my kind of journey, and really what I would have told myself back then.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, thank you. That is an absolute great question. I really appreciate it. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Unconversations podcast. A huge thank you to Dirk. I am so grateful for your time, and thank you so much again for joining me today.
Well, thank you.